The Galactic Council had watched the Vraxian Empire expand for 300 years. Every species they encountered fell before them. The Vraxians were perfect warriors, born with armored skin that could deflect laser fire and claws that could tear through reinforced metal. Their ships numbered in the millions. Their armies were endless, and they had never known defeat. Ambassador Crixtal of the Veloran Collective stood before the council chamber, his 4 eyes filled with fear. His people were the latest to fall. Their homeworld burned, its great cities reduced to ash, its oceans boiling from orbital bombardment. Their colonies lay in ruins, scattered across a dozen systems that now flew Vraxian flags, and now he had come to beg for something he knew was foolish. "The humans," he said, his translator crackling with static from his emotional state. "We must ask the humans for help." The chamber fell silent. Every representative shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their various appendages and tentacles and limbs moving with nervous energy. The humans were new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. They were small, weak creatures with soft skin and no natural weapons. They had no armored plates, no venomous stingers, no psychic abilities. By every measure used by the Council to assess a species' potential, they should have been nothing. They should have been prey. But something about them made the older races nervous, something no one could quite explain. High Arbiter Yenvak, the ancient leader of the Council, leaned forward in his elevated chair. His scaled face showed no emotion, though he had lived long enough to have seen the Vraxians grow from a minor threat to the dominant force in the galaxy. "The humans have declined to join the Council 3 times, he said, his voice like gravel sliding over glass. "They show no interest in galactic politics. They keep to themselves, trading only when necessary, sharing nothing of their internal affairs." "Why would they help us now?" "Because the Vraxians are coming for them next," Crixtal said, his voice cracking with desperation. "The Empire has announced their intention to cleanse the Orion Arm. Earth lies directly in their path. Surely they must see that standing alone is suicide." A murmur spread through the chamber like wind through tall grass. The Vraxians had never shown interest in human space before. It was too far away, too remote, too unimportant in the grand scheme of galactic conquest. But that had changed when the Empire discovered something in human territory. No one knew exactly what it was, but scouts reported that the Vraxian High Command had become obsessed with Earth and its inhabitants. Some said they had found evidence of ancient technology. Others whispered about resources unlike any in the galaxy. Whatever the truth, the result was clear. Humanity was now a target. "Send a delegation," the High Arbiter decided after a long silence. "Warn the humans of what approaches. Perhaps their self-preservation will motivate them to join our alliance. If nothing else, we may learn something about why the Vraxians are so interested in them." 3 days later, a council ship entered the Sol system. Ambassador Tevris of the Korathi people led the delegation. He had been chosen because his species most resembled humans in some ways, standing upright on 2 legs and possessing 2 arms, though he stood 8 feet tall and had blue skin and 6 fingers on each hand. His wide-set eyes could see in spectrums humans could not, and his ears could detect sounds from kilometers away. He was accompanied by representatives from 12 other species, all hopping to convince humanity to join their desperate fight against annihilation. What they found surprised them deeply. Earth's orbital defense network detected their ship immediately, within seconds of their emergence from hyperspace. Before Tevris could even compose his greeting, 6 human warships surrounded them in perfect formation, their weapons hot and targeting systems locked. The Council delegation had expected a primitive fleet, perhaps a few dozen vessels at most, built with the crude technology of a young species still learning to navigate between stars. Instead, they counted over 200 ships in Earth orbit alone, and long-range sensors showed thousands more spread across the system like a web of steel and fire. "This is Earth Defense Command," a voice said over the communication channel. It was calm, professional, utterly without fear. State your business. Tevris identified himself and his mission, requesting permission to speak with human leadership. There was a long pause, long enough that he began to worry they would be turned away without even delivering their message. Then the voice returned, just as calm as before. Permission granted. Follow the escort to Luna Station 7. They were led to a space station orbiting Earth's moon, one of dozens that Tevris could see from his viewport. The station was enormous, far larger than anything the Korathi had built in their thousands of years among the stars. It hummed with activity, with purpose, with a sense of controlled urgency that Tevris had only seen in military installations preparing for war. Humans moved everywhere inside the station, some in military uniforms of various colors and ranks, others in civilian clothes going about tasks that seemed routine despite the alien visitors in their midst. The delegation noticed something strange as they walked through the corridors. Every human they passed nodded to them politely, acknowledging their presence, but their eyes held no fear, no curiosity, no confusion. They looked at the aliens the way someone might look at expected guests, arriving for a scheduled meeting, as if they had been waiting for this moment. They were taken to a conference room with windows overlooking the lunar surface. 3 humans waited inside. 2 wore military uniforms covered in medals and ribbons that Tevris assumed indicated years of service and accomplishment. The third was a woman in plain clothes, her gray hair tied back in a simple style, her face lined with the marks of age and responsibility. Her name tag read, Director Chen, Global Defense Initiative. "Thank you for coming," Director Chen said before Tevris could speak. Her voice was calm, measured, completely controlled. "We've been expecting you." Tevris blinked, his secondary eyelids flicking in surprise. "You have?" "The Vraxians announced their intention to invade human space 6 months ago. We assumed the Galactic Council would eventually reach out once they realized what was happening." She smiled slightly, an expression that somehow managed to be warm and cold at the same time. "Please sit. Tell us what you need." The delegation exchanged confused looks, their various facial features expressing shared bewilderment. This was not how first contact usually went. Most species panicked when they learned about the Vraxian Empire. They begged for protection, offered tribute, promised anything in exchange for help. They wept and screamed and fell into despair. But these humans acted as if they had simply been invited to a routine business meeting to discuss quarterly reports. Tevris took a breath to steady himself and explained the situation as clearly as he could. The Vraxian Empire was unstoppable, he said. They had conquered 47 species across the galaxy. Their fleet numbered over 10 million warships, each one bristling with weapons that could level cities. Their ground forces were the most terrifying soldiers anyone had ever seen, genetically engineered for combat from the moment of their birth, knowing nothing but war. And now they were coming for humanity. Director Chen listened patiently throughout, her expression never changing. When Tevris finished his grim recitation, she simply nodded. "We're aware of the threat assessment," she said, as if he had just reported the weather. "Our intelligence agencies have been tracking Vraxian movements for the past 3 years. We have detailed information on their fleet compositions, their command structures, their tactical doctrines. We know what's coming." 3 years, Tevris said, unable to hide his shock. "But you only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. How could you possibly have intelligence assets that far into Vraxian space?" Director Chen's smile didn't waver. "We're very good at intelligence gathering. It's one of our specialties." One of the military officers, a man with close-cropped gray hair and sharp eyes called General Morrison, leaned forward with his hands clasped on the table. "What exactly is the Council offering in exchange for our participation in this alliance?" Tevris outlined the proposal that the Council had prepared. 12 species had agreed to pool their military resources against the Vraxian threat. Together, they could muster perhaps 500,000 warships. It was nothing compared to the Vraxian fleet, but it was better than facing them alone. The alliance would share technology, intelligence, and strategic coordination. Together, they might have a chance. And in exchange for joining, General Morrison asked. In exchange, humanity joins the Galactic Council, contributing its forces to the common defense and accepting Council authority in matters of interstellar policy. Director Chen exchanged glances with her colleagues. Something unspoken passed between them, a communication that Tevris could not interpret. Then she stood and walked to the window overlooking the stark lunar landscape. We appreciate the offer, she said, her back to the delegation. Truly we do, but humanity must decline. The chamber erupted into noise. The delegation couldn't believe what they were hearing. The Vraxians were coming, 10 million ships strong. Humanity would be destroyed, their planet burned, their people enslaved or exterminated. How could they refuse help? How could they be so foolish? You don't understand, Tevris said, trying to keep his voice steady despite his rising alarm. The Vraxians have never been defeated. In 300 years of expansion, no one has stopped them. Their warriors are genetically engineered for combat, bred to feel no fear and no mercy. Their ships are impervious to most weapons. Your species is young and inexperienced in galactic warfare. You cannot face them alone. You will die. Director Chen turned to face him, and for the first time, he saw something in her expression that gave him pause. Let me show you something, she said. She pressed a button on the wall, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room, filling the space with a three-dimensional map of the Sol system rendered in light and color. Planets orbited in their courses. Moons circled their parents, and among them, points of light indicated human ships and stations. This is what the Galactic Council's sensors detected when you entered our system, she said. Points of light appeared, showing the 200 ships in Earth orbit and the scattered forces throughout the system. A respectable defense for a young species, I'm sure you thought. Perhaps even impressive given our limited time among the stars. She paused and her smile grew wider. Now let me show you what's really here. She pressed another button. The map exploded with light. Thousands upon thousands of points appeared, flooding the display with an overwhelming density of markers. Ships hidden in asteroid fields, their signatures masked by the rocks around them. Stations buried deep within moons, invisible to all but the most advanced sensors. Weapons platforms floating in the darkness between planets, cold and silent, waiting. Defense networks stretching from Mercury to the outer reaches of the Kuiper Belt, layer upon layer of traps and guns and missiles. The delegation stared in shock, their various forms of expression all showing the same emotion: disbelief. There were over 50,000 warships in the Sol system alone, and the support infrastructure suggested the capacity for many, many more. That's impossible, one of the delegates whispered, his voice barely audible. You've only had faster-than-light travel for 50 years. No species can build that kind of fleet in such a short time. It would take centuries. You're right, Director Chen said. We started building it 200 years ago. She turned to face them fully, and for the first time Tevris saw something in her eyes that made him genuinely afraid. Not malice, not aggression, something worse. Certainty. Humanity has known about the Vraxian Empire for a very long time, she said. We've been preparing for this war since before your grandfather was born. We knew they were coming eventually. We knew we had to be ready. And we are. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry brush. Humanity had refused the Council's alliance. They intended to face the Vraxian Empire alone, armed with nothing but their own resources and their own determination. Every species in the known universe watched and waited, certain they were about to witness the extinction of another young race too foolish to know its own weakness. The Vraxian High Command received the news with amusement. Commander Vrexnek, leader of the invasion fleet, gathered his officers in the war room of his flagship, a vessel so large it could have housed entire cities. His massive form dominated the chamber, his armored skin gleaming under the harsh lights, his claws tapping rhythmically on the command table. "The humans have chosen death," he said, his deep voice rumbling through the chamber like distant thunder. "They are too foolish to accept help from their betters and too weak to resist the might of the Empire. This will be the fastest conquest in our history, over before it truly begins." His officers laughed, their armored forms shaking with cruel mirth. They had heard the reports about humanity, studied the intelligence gathered by their scouts. Soft skin that tore easily, fragile bones that shattered under impact. No natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. The humans would be harvested like any other weak species, their planet stripped of resources and their population either enslaved for useful labor or exterminated as worthless. Vrexnak studied the tactical display, his sharp eyes analyzing every detail. The human system was small, only one habitable planet worthy of the name. Their fleet, according to council reports, numbered perhaps 50,000 ships. A respectable number for such a young species, he admitted, but nothing compared to the 2 million ships in his invasion fleet. "We attack in 3 cycles," he announced. "Begin the approach. By the time we're done, no one in the galaxy will even remember there was ever a species called human." The Vraxian armada moved through hyperspace like a tide of destruction, a force that had swept away entire civilizations without slowing. In their holds, billions of soldiers waited for the coming slaughter, sharpening their claws and checking their weapons. In their minds, there was no doubt. Humanity would fall as every other species had fallen. They emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system and immediately encountered their first surprise. The space around them was empty. No human ships rushed to meet them in glorious battle. No defense platforms opened fire with desperate fury. There was nothing but the distant glow of the sun and the cold darkness of space stretching in every direction. "Sensors detect no enemy vessels within range," one of Vrexnak's officers reported, confusion evident in his voice. "The humans appear to have retreated to their inner system." Vrexnak frowned, his heavy brow creasing with suspicion. This was unusual. Most species either fled in terror or attacked immediately with whatever forces they had. They never simply waited. They never let an enemy approach unchallenged. "They're afraid," another officer suggested with a dismissive gesture. "They've realized their mistake in refusing the Council's help, and our hopping will show mercy if they don't resist." "There is no mercy in the Empire," Vrexnak said automatically, though his unease remained. "Advance. Let us see what these humans think they're doing." The fleet moved inward, 2 million ships in perfect formation, passing the frozen outer planets without resistance. They passed the gas giants, their massive forms reflecting the distant sun in swirls of color. Still no contact. Still no response. Only silence and darkness and the feeling of being watched. And then they reached the asteroid belt. The first volley came from nowhere. Thousands of missiles erupted from asteroids that sensors had marked as simple rocks, inert and harmless. They slammed into the Vraxian fleet with devastating precision, each one targeting shield generators and engine arrays with impossible accuracy. Hundreds of ships died in the first seconds, their armor cracking, their crews vaporizing, their wreckage spinning into the void. Vrexnak roared orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. His fleet spread out, returning fire at every rock that looked suspicious. Plasma cannons and particle beams lit up the darkness, shattering asteroids by the thousand. But for every launcher they destroyed, 10 more opened up from different positions. The asteroids themselves seemed to be weapons, exploding in cascades of shrapnel and radiation when hit, dealing damage even in their destruction. "Where are their ships?" Vrexnak demanded, his claws digging furrows into the command table. "We cannot locate them, Commander. They appear to be firing from remote positions, using automated systems and decoys. Our sensors cannot distinguish the weapons from the background radiation of the belt." The Vraxian fleet pushed through the asteroid field, losing ships with every passing minute. By the time they reached the inner system, over 100,000 vessels had been destroyed or disabled. A significant loss, Vrexnak admitted, but still only a fraction of his total force. And that's when the human fleet finally appeared. They emerged from behind Mars, from inside lunar craters, from positions hidden within the sun's corona itself. 50,000 ships, just as the Council had reported. But they moved with a coordination that the Vraxians had never seen from any enemy. They didn't attack in waves or clusters or individual squadrons seeking glory. They attacked as one single entity, every ship knowing exactly where to be and when to fire. The battle that followed would be studied for centuries to come. The humans didn't fight like any species the Vraxians had encountered in their 300 years of conquest. They didn't seek glory or honor in single combat. They didn't try to capture ships or take prisoners for interrogation. They simply killed with cold, mechanical efficiency, as if they were machines rather than living beings. Their ships worked in perfect coordination, sharing targeting data in real time across the entire fleet. When one vessel's shields failed, 3 others would move to cover it instantly. When a Vraxian attack squadron tried to flank them, human ships were already there waiting, having anticipated the maneuver before it began. It was as if the entire fleet shared a single mind, a single will, a single purpose. And the weapons. The Galactic Council had reported that human technology was primitive, decades behind the established races. But the weapons tearing through Vraxian armor were unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. Kinetic rounds that accelerated to nearly the speed of light, punching through shields that had stopped plasma cannons. Energy beams that cut through armor as if it weren't there, frequencies tuned to exploit molecular weaknesses in Vraxian hull materials. Missiles that adapted in flight, predicting and countering defensive maneuvers before they happened. After 6 hours of combat, the Vraxian fleet had lost nearly half its ships. Almost 1 million vessels destroyed, their crews dead, their wreckage spreading across the inner solar system. Vrexnak gave an order he had never imagined giving in his entire life of warfare. All ships retreat, fall back to hyperspace coordinates. It was the first time in 300 years that a Vraxian commander had ordered a withdrawal. The first time the Empire had failed to conquer a target they had chosen. And it was only the beginning. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the Vraxian fleet limped back to their territory. Over 1 million ships destroyed, countless soldiers dead, and humanity had lost less than 8,000 vessels, their crews saved by escape pods that the human fleet prioritized recovering even during battle. On Earth, there were no celebrations. Director Chen stood in the Global Defense Initiative's command center, watching the retreating enemy fleet on her display as it faded into hyperspace. Around her, hundreds of technicians monitored every aspect of human defense, updating systems, analyzing data, preparing for what would come next. "They'll be back," General Morrison said, standing beside her. His voice was quiet, meant only for her ears. This was just their invasion fleet. The main empire has billions of ships spread across their territory. They'll gather everything they have and return. "I know," Chen said, her eyes never leaving the display. "But we've done what we needed to do." "And what's that?" "We've shown them what they're dealing with. We've proven that we can fight. Now the real work begins." In the weeks that followed, something unprecedented happened across the galaxy. Species that had been conquered by the Vraxians for decades or centuries began to stir. Worlds that had been silent since their subjugation started sending messages to Earth through hidden channels and desperate couriers. They wanted to know how the humans had done it. They wanted to know if there was hope for them too. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, every representative present, every species watching through their networks. High Arbiter Yenvak, who had dismissed humanity as irrelevant just months ago, now spoke of them with something approaching reverence. The humans have accomplished what no other species has managed in 300 years, he said, his ancient voice carrying through the chamber. They have proven that the Vraxians can be defeated. They have shown that the Empire is not invincible. The question now is whether they will share their secrets with us. Ambassador Tevris was sent back to Earth, his ship moving through human space with a mix of trepidation and hope. This time, he came not with an offer of alliance that placed conditions on human cooperation, but with a simple plea for guidance. When he arrived at the lunar station, Director Chen was waiting for him in the same conference room where they had first met. "You want to know how we did it," she said before he could speak, that slight smile on her face again. "Yes, every species in the galaxy wants to know. Please, tell us what makes humanity different. What secret weapon do you possess? What technology have you developed that others lack?" Chen led him through the station, past rooms filled with equipment he couldn't identify, through corridors where humans moved with purpose and coordination, every person seeming to know exactly where they needed to be. They entered a vast chamber where a massive holographic display showed the entire human defense network, from the outer system to low Earth orbit, every ship and station and weapons platform rendered in light. "The answer is simple," she said. "We work together." Tevris shook his head, his secondary eyelids blinking in confusion. "Every species in the Council works together. We share technology and resources. We coordinate our fleets in joint exercises. We help each other when threats arise. But we could never achieve what you've done." "No," Chen said, turning to face him directly. "You don't understand what I'm saying. You work together when it's convenient. You form alliances when there's something to gain. You help each other when the cost isn't too high and the benefit is clear." She paused, and again he saw that strange intensity in her eyes, that certainty that had frightened him before. "Humans work together because we must, because cooperation isn't a strategy for us. It's survival. It's written into our very nature, burned into us by millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of painful history." She pressed a button, and the display changed to show Earth's history. Wars and plagues, famines and disasters, moments of triumph and moments of tragedy stretching back thousands of years. Violence and cooperation, destruction and creation, all intertwined. "We've been fighting each other since we climbed down from the trees," she said as images of ancient battles played across the display. "We've invented 1,000 ways to kill each other and 1,000,000 reasons to hate. We've committed atrocities against ourselves that would shock even the Vraxians. But every time we faced extinction, every time something threatened our entire species, we came together. Not because we wanted to, not because it was easy, because we had to, or we would have died." The display focused on a single event, about 200 years ago. A small object approaching Earth from deep space, invisible to all but the most sensitive instruments. "We detected the Vraxians 200 years ago," Chen explained. "A probe entered our system, scanned our planet, and transmitted its findings back to the Empire. Our scientists managed to capture and decode that transmission, and we learned what was waiting for us in the stars. We learned that we were not alone, and that what was out there wanted us dead." Tevris stared at the display, his mind struggling to comprehend. 200 years. Before humanity had even achieved space travel, before they had set foot on their own moon, they had known about the threat beyond their sky. "What did you do?" "The only thing we could do. We told everyone. Every government, every nation, every person on the planet who would listen. We showed them the transmission. We showed them what was coming. And then, for the first time in our history, we started preparing together." She gestured at the station around them, at the fleets visible through the windows, at everything humanity had built. "Everything you see, everything we've accomplished, started that day. 200 years of every human being on Earth working toward a single goal, regardless of their nationality or religion or politics. 200 years of scientists and engineers and soldiers and workers, all contributing what they could to our common defense. Not because they were ordered to, because they understood what was at stake. "But how?" Tevris demanded, his voice rising despite himself. "How did you convince your entire species to cooperate? Our records show that humanity was divided into hundreds of competing nations when we first detected your radio signals. You fought wars over resources and territory and ideology. You killed each other by the millions. How did you set all of that aside?" Director Chen smiled sadly. "We didn't set it aside. We still fight. We still disagree. We still hate each other sometimes, argue over politics and resources and whose approach is better. But we understand something that your species apparently doesn't, something we learned through centuries of nearly destroying ourselves." She leaned closer, her eyes holding his. "The fights between us don't matter if there's no us left to fight." The display changed again, showing the current state of human civilization. Billions of people across Earth and throughout the solar system, all connected by a vast network of communication and coordination. Every continent, every nation, every community contributing to the whole. "Every human being contributes to our defense," Chen said. "Not just the soldiers and the scientists, the farmer who grows food for the fleet workers, the teacher who educates the next generation of engineers, the doctor who keeps the shipyard crews healthy, the parent who raises children who will continue the work when we're gone. Every single person is part of our defense network, whether they realize it consciously or not. That's what species-wide coordination really means. Not alliances between governments that can be broken, not cooperation between fleets that can be withdrawn. It means every individual understanding, deep in their bones, that their survival depends on everyone else." Tevris was silent for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind since he first heard of humanity's victory. "Will you help us? Will you share this understanding with the rest of the galaxy?" Director Chen turned back to the window. Earth hung in the darkness, blue and green and white, surrounded by the invisible web of defenses that had stopped an empire. "Yes," she said finally, "but not the way you expect." The message went out across the galaxy 3 days later. It was broadcast on every frequency, in every language, to every species that could receive it. It came from Earth, from the species that had done the impossible, and it was addressed to everyone who had ever lived under Vraxian oppression. "This is Director Sarah Chen of the Global Defense Initiative, speaking on behalf of humanity. We know what you're facing. We know the fear you live with every day, the terror of waiting for Vraxian ships to appear in your sky. We know what it's like to look at your children and wonder if they'll grow up to be slaves. 47 species have fallen to the Vraxian Empire. Billions of beings have been killed or enslaved. The galaxy has accepted this as inevitable, as natural, as simply the way things are. We reject that acceptance. Humanity is not stronger than you. We are not smarter or more advanced. We have no special abilities or secret technology that makes us better than anyone else. What we have is a simple truth that we learned a long time ago, through centuries of blood and suffering. No one survives alone. We are not offering you an alliance that we control. We are not promising to fight your battles for you or solve your problems with our weapons. We are offering you something more valuable than any fleet or any technology. We are offering you the knowledge of what real cooperation means. Starting today, humanity will send teachers to any world that asks for them, not soldiers or weapons or advanced technology. Teachers. They will show you how we learn to work together across all our differences. They will help you build the same kind of coordination that protected our world, and they will stand beside you when the fighting comes. The Vraxians believe that the galaxy belongs to them. They believe that strength is measured in armor and claws and warships. They are wrong. True strength is measured in connections, in trust, in the willingness to sacrifice for someone you've never met because you understand that their survival is your survival. Humanity knows this because we almost destroyed ourselves learning it. We fought 1,000 wars against each other before we understood. We killed millions of our own kind before we realized that we needed each other more than we needed to win. The Vraxians will come for us again. They will come with everything they have, every ship and soldier in their empire. And when they do, they will find something they've never encountered in 300 years of conquest. Not a single species standing alone. Not a loose alliance of frightened worlds hopping someone else will save them. They will find a galaxy that has finally learned to work together. We are humanity. We are weak and soft and small by galactic standards, and we are going to show you how to win. The message ended, and then the galaxy began to change. On 1,000 different worlds, beings who had never dared to hope began to believe. Species that had been crushed under Vraxian rule for generations started to organize in new ways. Resistance movements that had been scattered and ineffective began to communicate with each other. And everywhere the question was the same: how do the humans do it? The first teachers left Earth 6 months later. They were an unusual group by any standard. Scientists and soldiers, artists and engineers, philosophers and farmers. They came from every nation and every background on Earth, united only by their willingness to share what humanity had learned. They spread across the galaxy, landing on any world that would have them, asking nothing in return but the chance to help. They didn't bring weapons or advanced technology. They brought something far more dangerous. They brought ideas. On the planet Korath, a human teacher named James Park worked with the survivors of a Vraxian attack that had left their civilization in ruins. The Korathi were a proud people who had once ruled a dozen star systems, but they had been broken by years of oppression and brutality. They no longer trusted each other because the Vraxians had taught them that trust was weakness. Every Korathi looked out for themselves first, because cooperation had been punished and betrayal rewarded. Park gathered them together in the ruins of their capital city, under a sky that still showed the scars of orbital bombardment. He didn't give a speech about hope or courage or destiny. He didn't promise them victory or salvation. He gave them a simple assignment. Build something together, he said. I don't care what it is. A house, a bridge, a garden, a water system. But it has to involve every single person here, everyone contributing something. The Korathi were confused and suspicious. They had expected military training, not construction projects. They had wanted weapons, not gardening tools. But Park was patient. Over the following months, he showed them how humans divided complex tasks among many people, how they communicated to coordinate their efforts, how they supported each other when someone was struggling instead of exploiting weakness. He showed them that working together didn't mean giving up individual strengths or identity. It meant combining them into something greater than any individual could achieve. 6 months later, the Korathi had rebuilt their city into something new, something they had created themselves through shared effort. More importantly, they had rebuilt themselves as a people. When a Vraxian patrol ship entered their system expecting to find broken slaves, they didn't panic or hide. They coordinated their response the way Park had taught them, every Korathi knowing their role, every action supporting every other, every individual a crucial part of the whole. The patrol ship was destroyed by their combined effort. It was a small victory, a single ship against a handful of converted civilian vessels, but it was the first time the Korathi had struck back at their oppressors in 50 years. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy, on dozens and then hundreds of worlds. Human teachers worked with species that had lost everything, their hope and their pride and their will to resist. They didn't promise easy victories or quick solutions. They didn't pretend that cooperation would solve all problems instantly. They simply showed what was possible when beings learned to work together as humanity had learned. And the Vraxians noticed. High Commander Vrexnak had survived the humiliation of the first battle against humanity. He had been demoted, stripped of his honors, forced to answer for his failure before the Vraxian High Council. But he was still alive, and he was watching what the humans were doing with growing alarm that none of his fellow officers seemed to share. "They're spreading their poison," he told the High Council in session after session. "Every world they touch becomes harder to control. Species that were completely broken are rising again. Resistance movements that we had eliminated are reforming and coordinating across entire sectors. If we don't stop them soon, we'll face a united galaxy instead of individual targets." The Council was dismissive of his warnings. The Vraxian Empire had trillions of soldiers and millions of ships. Their territory spanned a quarter of the galaxy. What could a few human teachers possibly do against such power? They were insects, and insects could be crushed whenever the Empire chose to do so. But Vrexnak knew better. He had seen what happened when humans fought together with that impossible coordination. He had watched his fleet torn apart by a species that should have been helpless prey. He understood something his superiors refused to see. "Send me to Earth," he demanded. "Give me every ship in the Empire. Let me destroy them before they destroy us, before their ideas spread any further." The Council debated for weeks while Vrexnak grew more desperate. Finally, they agreed to his request, though more to silence his warnings than because they believed him. The full might of the Vraxian Empire would be brought against humanity. This time, there would be no escape, no clever traps, no unexpected victories. This time, Earth would burn and the human plague would be eradicated. The armada that gathered over the following months was the largest military force in recorded galactic history. 50 million warships drawn from every corner of the Empire. Trillions of soldiers eager for combat and glory. Weapons that could crack planets open and extinguish stars. Enough destructive power to sterilize an entire arm of the galaxy. And High Commander Vrexnak led them personally toward the Sol system, determined to erase humanity from existence and prove that the Empire remained invincible. Director Chen received the news with the same calm she showed everything. The entire Vraxian Empire was coming, 50 million ships strong, carrying enough firepower to destroy Earth 1,000 times over. "We can't win," General Morrison said. They were alone in her office, the weight of the coming invasion pressing down on them like a physical force. "Even with everything we've built, even with the improvements we've made since the first battle, we can't fight those numbers. The math doesn't work." "No," Chen agreed quietly, "we can't." "Then what do? Do we evacuate? Do we scatter into the galaxy and hope some of us survive?" Chen looked out the window at Earth, the world she had spent her entire life defending. She had given everything to this moment, every decision, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every relationship sacrificed to duty. She had watched friends die and held colleagues as they wept. She had made choices that would haunt her forever, all leading here. And now, facing the end, she felt something she hadn't expected. "Peace. We do what humans have always done when everything seemed lost," she said. "We show them what we're made of, and we trust that we're not alone." The message went out across the galaxy, to every world where human teachers worked, to every species that had started to believe in cooperation, to everyone who had ever dreamed of freedom from Vraxian oppression. "They're coming for us," the message said, "and we need your help." The response was immediate, and it was beyond anything Chen had dared to hope. Ships began arriving at the Sol system, emerging from hyperspace in a steady stream that grew larger by the hour. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Korathi warships fresh from their victory over the patrol, crewed by warriors who had remembered how to fight together. Veloran refugee transports that had been converted to fighting vessels, their holds filled with beings who had lost everything and had nothing left to lose. Vessels from species that hadn't been free for centuries, ships held together by determination and hope, crewed by beings who had decided that if they were going to die, they would die fighting beside the humans who had shown them another way. The Galactic Council mobilized everything they had, every ship that could fly, every weapon that could fire. High Arbiter Yenvok himself led the Council fleet to Earth orbit. For the first time in galactic history, every free species stood together under a common cause. When the count was complete, Chen had over 10 million allied ships alongside humanity's 50,000. It was the largest gathering of coordinated forces the galaxy had ever seen. It still wasn't enough. The Vraxians had 5 times that number. The math still didn't work. But it was something. It was a statement. It was a galaxy that had finally learned to stand together. Why? Chen asked Yenvok when he came aboard the lunar station for the final strategy session. The ancient arbiter moved slowly, his great age showing in every step, but his eyes were clear and determined. You refused to help us before. You said we were too weak, too inexperienced, too foolish to refuse your alliance. What changed? Yenvok looked at her with eyes that had seen centuries of Vraxian conquest, centuries of watching species fall, while the Council did nothing that mattered. You showed us something we had forgotten, he said. You showed us that weakness is not in the body or the technology. It is in the spirit. Your species is small and fragile by any physical measure. But your spirit, your determination, your ability to work together despite every difference, is stronger than anything I've ever seen in 500 years of life. He placed his scaled hand on her shoulder, a gesture of respect from his people. You taught us to work together again. You reminded us what we could be if we weren't so afraid. Now let us fight together and show the Vraxians what a united galaxy can do. The final battle began 3 days later. The Vraxian armada emerged from hyperspace like a storm of death, 50 million ships darkening the stars with their mass. High Commander Vrexnak stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Allied fleet through his view screens with contempt and satisfaction. They've gathered everything they have, he said to his officers. All the insects of the galaxy in one place. They think cooperation will save them. They think standing together means anything against the might of the Empire. Commander, an officer reported. We're receiving a transmission from the human flagship. Vrexnak gestured for it to be played. Director Chen's face appeared on the screen, looking tired but resolute. High Commander, she said. Before this begins, I want you to understand something. You came here expecting to destroy a single species. Instead, you've united a galaxy. Every ship you see represents beings who chose to stand together rather than die alone. Every weapon pointed at your fleet was built by creatures who learned that cooperation is stronger than conquest. Vrexnak laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. Pretty words, human, but words don't stop plasma cannons. Numbers don't lie. You are outnumbered 5-1. This time you will not escape. No, Chen agreed calmly, but this might change your calculations. The display changed, showing the space behind the Vraxian fleet, the territory they had crossed to reach Earth. It was filled with ships. Not a few thousand, not a few million. Hundreds of millions of vessels, rising from every world the Vraxians had conquered, every system they thought they controlled, every colony they believed they had broken. Slave populations that had learned from human teachers and finally coordinated their rebellions. Resistance movements that had been waiting for this exact moment, building strength in secret for months. Entire species thought to be crushed beyond recovery, now armed with whatever they could find or build or steal, angry and ready to fight. While you were coming for us, Chen said, they were coming for you. Every world you left behind is rising. Every species you thought you'd conquered is fighting back, and they learned how to work together from us. Vrexnak stared at the display, his armored form frozen in something he had never truly felt before in his life of conquest. Fear. His homeworld was under attack. His supply lines were being cut. His entire empire, the civilization he had spent his life serving, was suddenly burning from within. You can stay here and fight us, Chen continued, her voice still calm and measured. Maybe you'll win. Maybe you have enough ships to destroy Earth and everyone defending it, even with everything we've gathered. But by the time you're done, by the time you've paid the price for victory here, you won't have an empire to go back to. Everything you've built over 300 years will be gone. For a long moment, the galaxy held its breath. 50 million Vraxian ships faced 10 million allied vessels, both sides waiting to see what would happen next. Then High Commander Vrexnak, leader of the greatest military force ever assembled, gave an order he never thought he would give. All ships fall back, return to defend the homeworld. The Vraxian armada turned and fled, not because they had been defeated in battle, not because their ships had been destroyed or their soldiers killed, but because they had been defeated by something they never understood, something they had dismissed as weakness for 300 years. Cooperation. In the weeks and months that followed, the Vraxian Empire collapsed like a structure whose foundation had been removed. Worlds that had been enslaved for centuries declared independence. Species that had never known freedom in living memory began to build new societies. The galaxy that had lived in fear for 300 years finally began to heal. There was still fighting, still resistance from Vraxian holdouts who refused to accept their empire's fall. There were still conflicts between species who had old grievances and new ambitions. The galaxy didn't become a utopia overnight, and no one expected it to. But something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in how species saw themselves and each other. And humanity, the small and soft and fragile species that no one had expected to survive, became something new. Teachers, they called themselves. Not conquerors, not leaders, not rulers, just teachers. They spread across the galaxy in greater numbers, helping other species learn what they had learned through millennia of painful experience. That working together was hard, harder than fighting alone. That it required sacrifice and trust and patience. That it meant accepting help from beings who were different from you and offering help without expecting reward. That it sometimes felt impossible. But that it was worth it, that it was the only thing that was ever worth it. Director Sarah Chen retired a year after the war ended, her life's work complete. She lived in a small house on Earth. Surrounded by gardens, she tended herself and grandchildren who barely understood why people from distant stars came to visit their grandmother. Sometimes ambassadors from worlds she had never visited would make the journey to see her, asking for advice, or simply wanting to meet the woman who had changed everything. She always told them the same thing. Humanity isn't special, she would say, her eyes bright despite her age. We're not braver or smarter or stronger than anyone else. We just learned something important a long time ago, learned it the hard way through suffering and death and nearly destroying ourselves a dozen times. We learned that the only way to survive, really survive, is together. And then she would smile, the same smile she had given Ambassador Tevris all those years ago. Now go teach someone else. The Galactic War had lasted 300 years and cost billions of lives. It ended not with a final battle or a dramatic victory, but with a simple truth that humanity had carried with them from their earliest days huddled around fires on the African savanna. No one survives alone. The species that understood this would thrive. The ones that didn't would fade away. It was as simple and as complicated as that. And somewhere, in the vast darkness between stars, the next generation of human teachers set out on their missions, each one carrying the same message, each one ready to share the same gift that humanity had earned through millennia of struggle. The gift of knowing that together, there was nothing they couldn't face.